can't tell, I tried hilariously hard to make the background of this video more aesthetically pleasing. My gigantic aloe plant from outside. This is actually my kitchen door. So the Ouija board was given to me by my coworker. But one night they're playing with the Ouija board. Played with a Ouija board before. This is one person's hand, this is the other person's hand. You're never supposed to let it go without saying goodbye. Have their hands on it, and he decides to move it just to like mess with her, and she freaked out and like cussed him out and stuff, and you know, they laughed it off, whatever. Like a week later, he's working on his truck, and his truck is parked on a hill outside of his house. If you live in Hawaii or if you've ever been here, you know a lot of houses are like up on hills and all that. So he's working on his truck and he's underneath it doing, you know, whatever, and the emergency brake releases and it runs him over. Luckily he's okay, but his father-in-law had to run outside and like grab the emergency brake and stop it from, you know, when I got it, me and Fish were playing with it, and he decides to mess with me the same way. So that month I had the worst time with my car. I ran into a tree, I got rear-ended, something else happened, I don't really remember. I just shared with you the story of my Ouija board and why I don't touch it anymore. So I know I just uploaded the video on the Roswell incident the other day. I was really excited just to film it, so I rushed through and kind of missed a lot of details. So I want to go back, make some corrections, and get more in-depth information on it. And as I'm doing this, I'm just gonna do my makeup. One of the things I saw was that in 1947, particularly the late part of 1947, so probably beginning around June is when all this stuff is really starting to happen, there's a lot of sightings of UFOs. So take that as you will. UFO sighting that kind of sparked all of this controversy or conspiracy in 1947 really began in Washington State. So if you'll remember the last video, I talked about how there were some sightings in Washington State, and that kind of led Mac Brazel to go and say, hey, sheriff, what the fuck's this? What actually happened was in June of 1947, so before the Roswell incident really made like big headlines or anything. So this pilot in Washington State, he is flying near Mount Rainier, and he spots 9 shining objects, and this is kind of where the term flying saucer came from. That's kind of the wordage or the description that he used. So look how cute this thing is that I got from Long's Drugs. It's a little watermelon. It's kind of hard to close. It's like an Easter egg kind of thing. You open it up, it's got a little beauty blender in it. I mentioned in the last video, I need to go back and kind of correct. Handy dandy notebook. Colonel Blanchard was actually the kind of high-ranking officer at Roswell Army Airfield, and he was the one that sent Major Marcel to go see the sighting and everything. Major Marcel was the one that went out to the site. However, the person who actually went to the media and was like, we've come into possession of aliens, that was actually Lieutenant Hott. He was a, I guess, sort of a public information officer. So I guess we cannot credit Marcel for his, you know, being the reason we have those types of career fields in the military. Sorry, Major Marcel. General Ramey, the high-ranking officer in Fort Worth, who was contacted by Roswell Army Airfield after they've been informed by the sheriff's office of this strange object. Actually, General Ramey was the one, he wanted all of the material from the site to be taken to Fort Worth for him to sort of investigate. And this is where they released the information saying they identified it as a weather balloon. So that's sort of where that was a little bit misconstrued in my last video, my bad. According to some people who are close to Mac Brazel, who's the rancher, by the way, he was harassed by the military to basically be quiet, because initially, I guess, when they came back and were like, no, it's just a weather balloon, background like, no, it's not. So according to some people who are close to Mac Brazel, he was basically paid off by the military or by the Air Force or by the government or whatever to be quiet about this, to not speak of it. And some people, shortly after all of this, Mr. Brazel, however you say it, he had a brand new truck, which, you know, being a rancher in 1947, that's not too long after, you know, the war. It's strange for him to just suddenly have this brand new truck. He also left his job as a rancher. I'm not sure, actually I saw something that he started a business in Alamogordo, which is about 3 hours or so from Roswell. Just from background, I have family in New Mexico. I've been to Alamogordo, and I don't really know what kind of business you would start there. Like, it's not really like a very good place to ranch, but I guess maybe back in the day it was like probably like a smaller town, and you know, I guess I could see, I'm not sure if there was a military base there quite yet, but there is one now. But anyways, so Mr. Brazel was said to, there's a lot of suspicion that he was paid off, that he was, you know, that's why he was, you know, this. Another thing I should mention is that, so Mr. Brazel, whatever, he was not the only witness to the Roswell incident. What I've heard is that there are as many as 600 witnesses, and they all have similar accounts. And one of the things I saw, an interesting way I saw somebody put it, that I agree with. If somebody's suspected of murder and you have 600 witnesses and they all come forward with the same detailing of the incident, nobody would question it. But because it's something controversial, all these people are kind of silenced in a way. So I thought that was an interesting way to put it. I don't know how I'm gonna do my makeup today. Give me a minute. I don't know how I want to do my makeup today. I should have thought about this before I sat down, I guess, but it'd be like that sometimes. I figured it out, and it's probably not gonna look very good, but I'm not a professional, so I can get away with it. But where was I? Anyways, I just think that's interesting that there are about 600 people, and you know, maybe people are full of shit sometimes. You also have to consider that this isn't just, you know, people in the area that saw this. These are people that came forward years later who were in the military. Like some of the names that I saw floating around. Let me get out my handy dandy notebook again. You know, this is obviously going to be years later. They're not going to do this immediately after all this happened, but some of the names I saw were Tech Sergeant Herschel Grice, Sergeant William Ennis, and Sergeant Earl Fulford. And they also said similar things. They said that this metal that was collected from the Roswell crash site was not like anything they'd ever seen. Even Major Marcel, years later, was interviewed and said that, you know, being military, although he was like I think he was like an intelligence officer, he'd been around a lot of aircraft, and I'm sure, you know, being a major, he was probably like in World War II at some point. This material that they found at Roswell was nothing like anything that he had ever seen on an American aircraft, or even, I'm sure he's probably been up close to some other country's aircraft or something, but he said it just wasn't the typical aircraft material. Because, you know, with airplanes, the metal that they use, it's pretty strong, but it also has to be very light, so it's not, you know, if you hit it with a hammer, it's gonna bend. Have you seen those pictures of when ducks or geese hit the front of aircraft? It's kind of hilarious. I'll try to include a picture in here because the damage that they do, because you have to think you have this plane that's flying 300 something miles an hour and it hits just this big old duck, it does some damage. I don't know if you ever hit an animal with your car. I haven't. I grew up in Virginia, like / West Virginia, so people hit deer all the time, and even like a small baby deer can do a lot of damage. I'm sure a big ass goose or a big ass flock of geese could probably really screw up a aircraft. So either way, back to what I was saying. So a lot of these eyewitnesses that were either involved in the cleanup in some way, or that were, you know, basically just even this is, again, like I said, this is military and civilian. This isn't just military people. There's also civilians that later came forward and said, yeah, like I saw some pretty weird shit. That's not how they said it, but. So shortly after this incident became public, after the correction was issued where military was like, just kidding, we didn't mean that, we don't actually have aliens, haha, go about your business, that sort of thing. So immediately after that happened, Colonel Blanchard went on leave. Have you been in the military, or even like in corporate jobs? It seems like important people always take leave at the most inconvenient times. Like when you really like need them there, they just ghost. Like they're like, okay, that was interesting, well now I gotta go on, I'm going on vacation, bye. People have said that this leave was not just, some scheduled leave that he had, sitting around. He actually used this leave, he probably wasn't even on leave. He was there apparently on the site directing cleanup. If the materials were as strange as some of these people have said, more than likely it probably took them a while to clean it up, because they don't have like the materials that you really need to take apart something like that. It's some type of weird, my neighbor's dog's barking, hold on. Blend, 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 blendy, blend, blend, my neighbor's dog's still barking, it's fine. Blend away, blend, 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 blend away, do, 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 blend away. I think my neighbor's dog's done barking now. So either way, so apparently Colonel Blanchard took leave during this time to go help and direct the cleanup and kind of oversee it and make sure nothing was getting out to the public, because now he's got to do extra damage control because old Lieutenant Hot went and done fucked up. And let's go back to Lieutenant Hot. This was really interesting. So from what I heard was that, what I heard through the grapevine, through my sources, aka Google. So Lieutenant Hot actually had a file from around the Roswell incident, and he kept it, and he said that he didn't want it opened until he was dead, basically. He said, when I die, you can go ahead and open this, which, ooh, hot gossip. Get it? Hot, because his name, shut up, Janie. General Ramey, who wanted all of the materials from the crash site brought to him in Fort Worth, and apparently they took pictures of it. Like, that's where you get the pictures of some of the military people holding it in photos. Those are the ones that were released to the public. That Hot left that said, do not open till I die, or whatever it said. So when it was open, they found out there was a note that basically said, I don't know if it was a note or if it was like a series of documents or something, but he basically said that the materials that were used in these photos was not the material that was found at Roswell. He said, there's materials from a weather balloon to stage these photos. That would be easier to explain to people, like, hey, look, it's just a freaking weather balloon. When you talk to people who are witnesses, or when you read the interviews of people, I guess you can't really talk to too many people who are witnesses, they're all probably dead. Some people said there were certain parts of the aircraft that you could manipulate in your hands, but then as soon as you let it go, it would just pop back into whatever form it was before, which I thought was really interesting. So again, yeah, Lieutenant Hot left this little note-ski saying, hey, this shit that you're seeing in pictures is not what I saw at Roswell. Going forward a little bit, so this is in 1974, Major Marcel's retired, and he is interviewed by a man of the name Stanton Friedman. And when you look into the Roswell incident, Stanton Friedman's pretty much the guy who, well after the incident, was still demanding answers. The way I've seen him described is he's a UFO expert, which is really, I want that job. So Stanton Friedman actually interviewed Major Marcel years later after the incident. All right, I had to pause while I was doing this. I don't know if you'd even call this a cut crease. She doesn't deserve to be called a cut crease, but you know, it is what it is. Stanton Friedman was actually the one who interviewed Major Marcel, where he said, you know, this material couldn't bend, it couldn't be broken up with a hammer. He was the one who said, you know, I'm familiar with aircrafts. I know what an aircraft looks like, or at least a earthly aircraft looks like. And this ain't it. This is not it. He was like, this is not the same thing. This is not the same type of material. So we can actually go ahead and credit Mr. Stanton Freeman for that interview, you know. Stanton Freeman is sort of the one that began calling Roswell Cosmic Watergate, which is just beautiful. He's the one that came out and was like, it was a cover-up, which, I mean, people knew that. People were like, duh. But now he kind of had a little bit of, you know, credibility, because he's a person who basically has dedicated his entire life to investigating UFO sightings. So going back to the first video, so as we know, so it was actually in 1994 when the Roswell report was released to the public. So that's another correction I gotta add to the thing. So 1994 is when the Roswell report came out, and again, people were, at the time, people who were really heavily invested into the Roswell incident and it being a cover-up were kind of demanding, like, you know, what about these dummies? What about these altitude? And I realized in the first video I called them atmosphere dummies, which is just stupid. They're dummies that are used to sort of study the effects of falling from the sky, I guess. I don't know if they had like pressure systems in them that pressures what kind of things would happen in the body at different levels or whatever, but either way, that was the explanation. If you'll recall from the first video, that was the explanation the military gave for the bodies that were seen at the site. Interestingly enough, basically these dummy tests actually weren't done until the 1950s. They weren't done until about mid-1950, or these weren't done until about mid-1950s. So something ain't right with that. A lot of the witnesses who have saw these bodies at the Roswell crash site have said that the bodies were really small. They said they were about anywhere between 3.5 to 4 feet tall or long. And when you look at the dummies that were used for these atmosphere drop tests, they were actually about 6 feet tall. So it doesn't really add up. It doesn't really match up, does it? So where does this kind of leave us now? Like, again, there's a lot more. If you look into Stanton Freeman, he has uncovered a lot of things. And like I said in the first video, pretty much everybody who I've mentioned, including the daughter of Major Marcel, she wrote a book, and pretty much everybody who was involved in this wrote a book about it. So there's obviously some skepticism about this because it is such a small town. You know, people wonder, are these people who are witnesses and that have written books and probably made at least a little bit of money off of it, are they just trying to capitalize off of this? And it's interesting now, if you go to Roswell, New Mexico, I have family there, so they've been there, they've seen this. You go to Roswell, basically their entire identity now is based off of the Roswell incident. When you drive into town, there's a big sign with like a UFO on it, just abducting a cow. It does seem like it kind of benefited Roswell in a way. It brought something interesting, and it's kind of one of those, if you're like one of those weird people who likes to go on road trips and just take pictures of like weird things, like the gigantic ball of string or ball of yarn or whatever, like world's largest blank 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 whatever. Like even if you go to Alamogordo, it's like the world's largest pistachio. It's not even like a real pistachio, it's just a statue of pistachio or something. So it's kind of become one of those towns you stop by on a little road trip, you stay at a cheap motel, and you go see some tacky tourist kind of things. So in a way, there's some skepticism about this because of that. The town has kind of built its identity now off of what happened. And, you know, good for them. So I lived in New Mexico for about 6 months when I was like 11. when I moved from New Mexico to Virginia, nobody knew that that was really a state. Granted, I moved to a really small town, but a lot of people were like, oh, so you're not American. I'm like, it was kind of like in Mean Girls when she's like, if you're from Africa, why are you white? I remember this one kid, just for some background, so my dad had just gotten out of the military, and they were trying to kind of figure out where they wanted to settle down, and we had family in New Mexico. We went out there, and my dad was like, I don't think this is really where we want to go, and my mom was from Virginia, and that's where her and my dad met, so that's where we wound up settling after my dad got out of the military. But I didn't live there for that long, so I didn't learn Spanish or anything. Look at me. I am so Scot-Irish. I'm so white you can see me from outer space, okay? Like, never misidentify me for any other race. Like, I moved to Virginia. I remember one time this kid, like not long after we moved there, and it was a really small school. I was used to like way bigger schools, and this kid asked me, because people are obviously, they're curious, you know, it's a small school, like class one day, and they had me introduce myself because I was the new kid, you know, all that embarrassing shit. This kid was like, so does that mean you're Mexican? I'm like, no, not at all. Not even a little bit. Anyway, so especially if you move to like a really rural kind of place, people forget that New Mexico is actually a state. Like, it's just one of the states nobody really talks about too much. So obviously having Roswell and having an attraction there was a good thing for the town. So I wonder if these people who have written books and made money off of the incident, if they're just, I just tried to use my notebook as a mirror. A lot of people are skeptical about this because obviously, like, now New Mexico's got something going for it. So yeah, that's all I really have on the incident itself. Like, there's a lot of books, a lot of documentaries out there that you can watch on it or read about it and stuff, but it's very sticky. Like, when you try to just straight up Google it, it's really hard to find a whole lot of information, and the only pictures you can find are those that were released to the public from General Ramey's office, where he had them bring the materials, which, you know, according to Major Marcel many years later, said that that wasn't the same stuff that was at the incident. So I don't know. I really enjoy conspiracy theories because they're just interesting to me. Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist myself. There's definitely some things where I'm like, yeah, that was probably a cover-up. But if you've ever, like I said in the last video, if you've ever worked for the military or for a government system, you know there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get released to the public. Some of it's just stupid stuff. It's like, what are they going to do with this information anyways? But you never know. There's some crazies out there. So to me, like, I don't really get too invested in conspiracy theories as far as like, oh my god, you know, especially right now in the world, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about the coronavirus, COVID-19, all that. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about that, and that stuff is just so nuts to me, that some people can believe that stuff, that believe that this virus is just made in a lab to make certain people look bad. It's like the whole world was affected by it, dude. It's not. As Americans, we are a little bit more, we're very US centric. Like, we think, you know, we're the leaders of the free world, and anything that anybody else says, they're just trying to make us look bad. So I'm editing this video, and I just wanted to kind of clarify something when I'm talking about the US being very US centric. What I mean is Americans are very US centric, and we tend to be the ones that say that there's some conspiracy with the whole coronavirus thing. And I'm in a lot of Facebook groups with people from the UK and from Australia, from other countries, and we're always the ones that seem to think that this is somehow about us. So yeah, I just want to clarify that. And you know, that's just my opinion. Yeah, I don't know, like, I enjoy conspiracy theories. I enjoy stories about cryptids. I think are really interesting. I haven't noticed, I have ADHD, so yeah, I have a really hard time staying on topic. And the 10, I gotta like go back. Like they say? Sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat that? But yeah. But it's I'd like to know. I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on the Roswell incident. Any research on it? Have you seen something that maybe I missed? Is there something more to it? Do you think there's something more to it? But yeah, what other type of conspiracy theories do you guys like? Should I talk about more? Should I just do more research on more alien things? Because that's, like, I love that stuff. I used to be kind of weirded out about it. I think it's because when I was a kid, I watched a lot of Unsolved Mysteries. I love the new reboot on Netflix. I think it's fantastic. I just realized I forgot to put on Foundation again. One of them that were about aliens, and the ones where people would get, like, abducted super freaked me out. Did not like that at all. When people talked about getting probed and stuff, I'm like, ooh, no, I don't want that. Please don't take me. Now I'm like, that I'm adult, I'm a lot more, what's the word? Depressed? A lot more cynical now. So I'm like, aliens, come take me away. But don't probe me still. I just want to be your friend. Anyways, that's all I really have. I just want to make a few corrections, add some stuff. I couldn't really find much more in the way of conspiracies other than it being a gigantic cover-up. Oh! That's what I forgot to add. So I forgot to add that in 1999 was when the United States Air Force released the document. It was called the Roswell Case Closed, and that's where they added the information about the dummies. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you liked my new setup. I'm enjoying it. I think it's really nice. I wish I could show you guys just how, you know what, I'm gonna do it. This is how I have my camera sitting right now. It's actually on like a microphone thing. I just want to show you how precarious. This is the thing I use to clip my phone on. And yes, I use my phone. Again, you probably figured that out, but either way. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know if you would like me to cover any other cool conspiracy theories, talk about some cryptids, talk about the news. I'd rather not do that. But besides that, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. Please like and subscribe if you would like to. No pressure. But yeah, I'm gonna try to upload at least a couple times a month. I don't really have a set schedule right now. Things are kind of crazy with work and with the pandemic we are all living through. Thanks for watching again, and I hope you have a great weekend slash day slash week slash whatever it is slash night. Sleep tight. I don't know. I'm slowly losing my shit. But yeah, thanks again. Bye.